Hello and welcome. Today we're going to get into something that can truly make or break any construction project: cost estimation. So whether you're a student just getting into the field or you're a seasoned pro, we're about to build a really solid foundation for mastering this skill. Let's jump right in.
I mean, we've all seen it, right? A new building, a bridge, maybe even a simple home renovation that just gets delayed for months or goes completely wildly over budget. More often than not, the root of that problem can be traced right back to the beginning, to a flawed or maybe just a rushed cost estimate. Well, today, we're going to talk about how to change that.
So let's start by laying the groundwork. What exactly is cost estimation? Believe me, it is so much more than just plugging numbers into a spreadsheet. It's really the blueprint for a project's financial success. At its heart, cost estimation is all about forecasting everything you're going to need: the money, the materials, the labor, the time, all of it to take a project from just an idea to a finished reality. Think about a school, an office tower, a bridge. The estimate is what has to happen before a single shovel ever hits the ground.
And this is exactly why it's so critical. A good estimate isn't just some number. It's a strategic tool. It helps everyone involved make smarter decisions. It's the basis for your schedules and your budgets, and it sets the benchmark you'll use to track your performance. It can even tell you whether the project is even worth doing in the first place.
All right, so what's in an estimator's toolkit? Well, the most fundamental tools are understanding the different kinds of costs and the different levels of estimates. Let's break those down.
Okay, let's look at how costs get separated, because getting this right is absolutely foundational. First, you've got your direct costs. These are the most obvious ones, right? They're directly tied to a physical part of the project. Think about the actual concrete and rebar for a foundation. Next up, you have direct overhead. Now, these are costs still tied to this specific project, but not to a single task, like the site manager's salary or renting that temporary site office. And finally, there's G&A overhead, which stands for general and administrative. Just think of this as the cost of keeping the lights on for the whole company. The corporate accounting team. That gets spread out across all the projects.
Estimates also change and get more accurate over time. Think of it like drawing a building. Early on, you create what's called an order of magnitude estimate. It's kind of like a quick pencil sketch on a napkin. It gives you a general idea of the shape and size. It's super fast, but it's not very precise. It's really based on past projects. But as you get the detailed architectural plans and firm quotes from your suppliers, you develop a definitive estimate. Now, this is the detailed, to-scale blueprint. It takes a lot more time, of course, but it gives you that high level of accuracy you absolutely need for the final budget approval.
So how do we actually go about creating these estimates? Well, there are two main philosophies, two main paths you can take to get to that final number: the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach.
And I really love this way of thinking about it. One method starts with the big picture and works its way down, kind of like looking at the project from the sky. The other one starts with the tiniest details and builds its way up from the ground.
Let's compare them for a sec. Top-down estimating is perfect for those early stages when you just don't have a lot of details. You might use historical data, for example. Let's say you know that testing usually takes up about 40% of the budget on similar projects, so you can allocate that portion. On the other hand, bottom-up is for when the scope is really well defined. Here, you break the project down into every individual task: flooring, HVAC, electrical. You cost out each one, and then you add them all up for a really detailed total. And this is just a brilliant illustration of that bottom-up process. It's very methodical. You start by creating a really detailed work breakdown structure. Then you assign a cost to every single one of those little tiny pieces. And finally, you roll it all up into one comprehensive and hopefully very, very accurate total project cost.
Okay, now that we've covered the fundamentals, let's get into the strategic thinking that really takes an estimator from just good to truly great. This is all about estimating like a pro. Here's something that is so crucial to remember. Estimates do not exist in a vacuum. A whole bunch of factors can throw you off. The longer a project runs, the more time there is for things to go wrong. Your team's skill level. An experienced crew is way more predictable than a green one. Then there's your organization's own culture around risk, and of course, the big one, external shocks like sudden inflation or total supply chain chaos. A real pro has to account for all these variables. So how do you stay sharp? How do you build that trust? Well, here are some best practices that are pretty much non-negotiable. First, and this is the big one, you have to involve people who actually do the work. If you need to know how long it takes to pour a foundation, you go ask the crew foreman, not just a project manager. Their hands-on knowledge is absolutely priceless. Also, and this is so key for integrity, don't pad your estimates with hidden cushions of money or time.
Be upfront about the costs and use a formal, separate risk fund to account for uncertainty. It's all about being transparent.
And on the flip side, here are the traps that can sink a project. Like we just said, padding. It just destroys trust and makes it impossible to know what the real numbers are. Forgetting to formally account for risk isn't being optimistic, it's basically gambling with your client's money. But maybe the biggest killer of all is a poorly defined scope. If you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be building, there's no way you can know what it's going to cost. Always remember, scope creep always leads to budget creep.
All right, let's bring it all together into our final blueprint. So what's the key takeaway from all of this? What should you really remember when you walk away from this today?
It really just comes down to this. Cost estimation isn't just a technical task, it's a strategic one. A great estimator doesn't just add up a bunch of numbers. They use those numbers to build trust with everybody involved, to bring a sense of order to the natural chaos of a complex project, and ultimately, to keep everything on track.
So, as we close this out, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Based on everything we've just covered, from the different types of costs to all the pitfalls to avoid, what is your biggest estimating challenge? Thanks so much for joining me.